The manufacturing industry has a large global impact on the environment, and everyone sees the need to change. So how can circular solutions and sustainable partnerships help the industry in this transition? This is Momentum Talks, a show about smart factories. Welcome, Ricardo Cano from Atlas Copco, Mélanie Despeisse from Chalmers University in Gothenburg, and with us from Marelli in Milan, we have Denise, Lana, Molina. Great to have you all here.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Circularity is a buzzword, but let's start with a big question. How far are we actually from circular manufacturing today, Mélanie?
I think we've made a lot of progress already. So if I look at how circular economy started in research in the early 2000s and how it has evolved in the 2010, 2015. It initially was very focused on recycling, I would say, but we've seen the maturity of the concept advance, and now we have understood that it's more about higher value, material retention and product value retention, so through product reuse and product repair, remanufacturing, refurbish. So moving a little bit further away from only recycling, that is the least desirable strategy. So I think the maturity has increased a lot. But I still find that it's not applied at the scale that we need. So from the theory to practice, there's still quite a big bridge to, how do you say? No,
there's
a big gap. There's a big gap to bridge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ricardo, from the supplier side, what are you doing to move towards a more circular manufacturing?
I agree that things change, but not change enough. And what we see is that there are different customers, different companies in different levels. So to analyze it broadly, we need to have a good partnership with them to make sure that our circular activities combine with their circular activities to achieve overall goal, to have actually a circular economy. So the partnership is really key there.
How important is the cultural aspect in all of this, Mélanie?
I think there's a big element of cultural change that happens. I think it is cultural change in general in society, moving away from wanting to buy new things all the time, but also in organization, completely rethinking what is value, what is performance, what is success. So I think the organizational cultural change that is required is also quite large. So I think it will take a lot of courage and brave experiments in companies to get there.
Denise, have you seen this cultural change in Marelli? How have you been working with that?
A lot, I would say every day. And sometimes are just tweaks here that makes a huge difference in the culture. So 3 years ago, we decided to just simply decouple the indicator. Okay, we are not going to measure any more waste by tons of products or by hours, or nothing, just waste. And we want to decrease this in absolute terms. It's a tweak. It's nothing, right? Simple. But it triggered a huge cultural change. Actually, almost a revolution, because for the first year, there was a lot of questions and everybody was a little bit upset because, look, I always work like this. How can we just measure waste in absolute terms? That's not something we can do. And then, of course, we missed the target. And then for the second year, we meet the target because we found opportunities to reduce waste in absolute terms. And now for the third year, we have projects that will secure the achievement we had for the second year. But it's just a tweak on the indicator that drove a huge impact on the action side.
So when you're working with customers today, how high on their priority list would you say that circular manufacturing is?
I think decarbonization is still the first one. And circularity, I see, is a moment that we are looking at how can we make this work together? Because they might have their ambitions in circularity, but they don't know how to pull it through, consider the complex supply chain. What circular activities do I have that then benefit the customer to achieve their own targets? So this alignment is extremely important. Otherwise, you're just working in the island. And I fully agree with Denise was saying. Sometimes it's just a tweak that makes the whole difference, how we see the problem in a different angle.
In some of our projects, what we've done is actually ask the right question that would trigger the change. So we are surrounded by systems that function really well, but not necessarily efficiently. So asking the right questions, having the right way of measuring things, like Denise was saying, I think can really highlight where the opportunities are. So I think waste is all around us if only we see it as value.
Is there any way of measuring that you've seen that you think have been more effectful when you've been talking to companies?
Measuring things in absolute terms, I agree with Denise, I think can be a big change because companies will have a tendency to increase production to meet demands, and therefore if we have only relative indicators, we may not be able to see whether we are in absolute doing better or not. But also it's measuring the invisible. So a lot of the waste that we have is actually not necessarily metered. So we know the cost of it, but we don't always know how much waste we have, either because the waste is hidden in pipes. It can also be wasted time or wasted information. So making waste visible but help us understand what this waste is and what is the value of this waste.
And what would you say are the main hurdles that companies are facing today in their movement towards circular manufacturing?
I think one of the big hurdles is the fact that if you want to be part of a circular economy, there's quite a lot of change that needs to happen upstream and downstream, because a circular economy is a big complex change that involves a whole value chain. So I think the big hurdles is understanding how do we position ourselves in that big systemic change.
Sounds like a lot of collaboration is necessary. So as a supplier, Ricardo, how are you working together with your customers towards more circular manufacturing?
It's about the win-win. When you put the cards on the table and you're clearly explaining how one product or service will impact them on their circularity ambitions, and they understand that will be a reduction of cost, that invisible cost that is mentioned, that would help to move forward faster. So it's about a partnership, needs to be a win-win to get this momentum, to get the speed when it comes to sustainability and circularity, whatever you'll be working with.
Coming from the more academic side of things, I assume that you have a lot of partnerships going on with companies around the world as well. What are the big hurdles you usually run into with these partnerships?
I think one of the biggest hurdles is what we've just heard from both Ricardo and Denise, the fact that you need collaborations. So companies cannot achieve circular economy on their own. They need to build trust, build relationships and collaborations with partners upstream, downstream. So the complexity of the system that has to change is one of the biggest barriers. But another one, I think, is a little bit more subtle, that is the understanding of what circular economy really means for our company, and looking also inwardly at what can we do, what is in the realm of our influence or control that we can already do. And I like to start to talk about those experiments. So you start small, so you look at where you can do some pilots or some prototypes and learn by doing. And then once you know how it works, then I think you're better equipped to work with your supply chains or with your customers to bring them along. But I think the maturity of circular economy in practice is not quite there yet. I think theoretically we know what it means, we understand circular strategies, but to actually make them work in practice, I think it will take a number of iterations. But yeah, I think the complexity, the size of the change that needs to happen is one of the hurdles, but we can start step by step with experiments.
And I like a lot what she mentioned about this idea of piloting, because you should start small and preferably start with your partner, because typically what you see in these organizations, you want to do everything at once. Let's make a pilot with several countries at once, and then we do it only one area. But that circularity doesn't really work like that, because what might work in one area of the world might not work in the second. So this idea of piloting is key for change management that we require to run a circular business.
What would be some things to think about when starting a pilot?
I would start, you can look at from engineering perspective, like you have to design for circularity, design for service. So you look at how can I increase the lifetime of the products. Look at what softwares can do, because in many cases we have softwares that allow us to do monitoring a long distance. I would also look at the supply chain, how resilient is the supply chain in terms of the raw materials perspective. And also there's this idea, many tools would reach the end of the lifetime, and most likely they would just be discarded. We can look into pilots to reuse the spare parts available on those products, or creating a circular flow that those end products will generate new spare parts for the future ones.
How do you work with partnerships at Marelli, Denise?
We have upstream with suppliers, and we are being successful in little pilots for packaging specifically. So when we start to address packaging or the waste coming from packaging, we learned that unavoidably we have to collaborate better with the suppliers. And then also we had a collaboration with a customer to remanufacturing one part of the car. So in the pilot looks like promising, and yes, okay, it looks like an opportunity here. But both Marelli and this customer, we couldn't make it happen because it was not financially feasible. So we keep working with customers and suppliers. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes not. But as Ricardo said, we had to pilot, start small, and keep moving. Otherwise, we are going to be here forever. And this is not an excuse for inaction.
I find it's actually great that we dare also to talk about the cases where it doesn't work, whether it doesn't work economically or it doesn't work because circular economy does not always mean a lower environmental impact. So yes, you need to measure to check it is. But I think we also need to dare to talk about the cases that don't work. And this is where there's a big F word. Failure. We have to dare to talk about the cases where it failed because we can learn from it. And I know it can be very sensitive to do that because there's a reputation or we want to look good and we are very proud of our successes. So we tend to forget about the cases where it failed. But I think these are very, very precious. And when things don't work, I think there's so much learning that goes there.
But I think that's the whole point on sustainability. I think sustainability is one of those topics or the topic where you can have an open discussion across the supply chain because you need to dare to change. And I like a lot the idea of you should talk about the pilots that didn't work because those are the ones that lead the one that would work. So that's also very exciting on the sustainability field. There's openness to discuss about what works and doesn't. Let's share best practice.
Would you say that it's more dangerous as a company to look like you're doing nothing than it is to be seen as trying something and failing? Or what do you think is
I prefer to be a company that is trying, failing, but move on. So because history is full of cases where people just wait for others to try and actually they themselves failed. So an innovation company needs to try and it didn't work and you regroup and you try something new.
But naturally, this is a type of transition that also comes with quite a few costs involved, I would think. Do we have any chances of actually increasing our profitability with this work?
I believe we have many. That's the idea of a power of less. Because if you use less resources and you're delivering it more, you're going to improve the profitability. If you're reusing packaging, you're making sure your products last longer, so you're going to have a bigger loyalty with the customer. So that's where we're going to drive this change. And it's about the quantification. You make sure that the customer understands that as a benefit as well.
And Denise, how are you using increased profitability as an argument for circular manufacturing and Marelli?
I do not believe in, we're gonna charge a premium price for this solution because this is better or this is more sustainable. I don't think this is sustainable itself, both from the consumer side and also from the company side, because I don't see just yet a company who is able to pay more for a solution that gives them the same benefit for a lower environment cost. And I think we are still in the stages of reducing costs, being more efficient, looking for ways to do things differently, look for ways to collaborate. But I think the whole system has to be redesigned. We have to find or figure out new business models that maybe doesn't exist yet or exist in other areas of the society that we have to borrow.
And Mélanie, are there any key factors in accelerating your work towards circular manufacturing?
Yes, I think for accelerating the circular economy transition, I think one of the big factors is starting small, experimenting and learning, getting momentum in the company, understanding what works and what doesn't. So that means also embracing the case where it failed, so the experiment didn't work, but what can we learn from that will allow us to be more successful the next time. But also regulations. And if we only wait for the profitability, I think it might take some time because unfortunately, consuming resources and being wasteful does not always cost so much. So I think regulations will be a big pressure to push the whole industry to move together and therefore getting the speed and scale that we need for the change.
Ricardo, is there any low-hanging fruit where we can start?
I feel that sustainability is part of the daily life. So I would invite our listeners to have a look on how they can, the way that they work and what exactly is impacting sustainability, because they realize that maybe they are doing a lot already. And they will see that sustainability grows on you very fast. I'm working with this 1.5 years and it really is engaging. I mean, this is not a politicized topic, it's just a daily life topic, and this would help to speed things up. And when you start seeing sustainability, you don't stop it. You see it everywhere.
And with that, I would like to thank you all for coming and telling us more about the role of circular manufacturing in smart factories. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So clearly, the work has just begun. Here are some takeaways. The awareness is growing, but there's still a long way to go. True circularity requires deep collaboration across the value chain. It's crucial to get everyone on board for the transformation. Sustainable practices often lead to cost savings. And in a world of limited resources, the manufacturing industry needs to do more with less. Thank you so much for watching our show about smart factories.